If you want to fight, be weak. If you don't want to fight, you got to be strong.
That's an interesting way to put it.
And we've been weak for a long time.
When you serve on the front lines for America, you learn very quickly what's important and what's not. Today we speak with North Carolina Congressman Patrick Harrigan, a decorated Green Beret veteran who believes we should avoid war whenever we can. But when that's not possible, America must be in it to win it. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., it's 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Well, Congressman, great to have you on the show. I can say this without any reservation. I'm always going to look up to you. You're very tall. This is very good to actually be here in person with you.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, your life story speaks for itself. Highly decorated Special Forces veteran, 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. But you've said when America fails to lead, the world burns.
It's just a simple truth that I've developed over my time in service and being a student of history. As you know, I'm a graduate of West Point, so all of us are very concerned with history that come out of West Point. And that's just the God's honest truth. When America fails to lead, the world burns. And the world is absolutely burning right now because of the 4 years under President Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And what a mess we have to fix. And we're in the process of fixing it, but that is not an easy task.
You believe we should deter wars whenever we can, but when we can't, let's make sure we have what we need to win.
Yeah.
What do we do about adversaries like Iran, North Korea, and others? These are like tinderboxes.
Yeah.
How do we try to stay out of war? And then what do we need to do to make sure if we're ever involved in war that we go into it with everything we've got?
We need to be strong. The biggest reason that I ran for Congress is because, as you mentioned earlier, I got to a point where I realized we had failed leaders that were leading us down the road to failed outcomes. And the spark in my life was the fall of Afghanistan. And one of the things that I was so frustrated about is I believed that it condemned the next generation of Americans to conflict. If you want to fight, be weak. If you don't want to fight, you got to be strong.
That's an interesting way to put it.
And we've been weak for a long time. I mean, going all the way back to the beginning of the global war on terror, right? Our time in Afghanistan, making terrible decisions to stay in Afghanistan after we didn't get Osama bin Laden, and understanding that would have been an almost impossible political decision to make, but it would have been the right decision to make. Making the mistake of going into Iraq and then playing out 15 years of weakness against Vladimir Putin, right?
Yeah.
He invades Georgia in 2008. President Bush did absolutely nothing about it. And you have the crossing of a red line in Syria by a regime backed by Vladimir Putin, and President Obama did nothing about it. Putin going into Crimea, President Obama doing nothing about it. And then walking out of Afghanistan with our tail between our legs just gave a green light for the world to explode. And that tinderbox that was there that had built up over so many years did in fact catch fire. And now we're dealing with multiple fires all over the world. You know, the wars and rumors of wars are very real. They're out there. We're contending with them. And as you said, my charter up here is to make sure that we don't fight wars we shouldn't fight, but that we absolutely set the conditions for our troops to win the ones that we do.
It sounds like you really buy into the doctrine popularized by Ronald Reagan, peace through strength.
Absolutely, I do. And that's exactly the take that President Trump has, too. We've got to be the biggest, baddest force on the block, and not just in talk, but in action. And I believe that President Trump is working towards making sure that America fills that role once again. And we're doing everything we can in Congress alongside of him to make sure that we effectuate those outcomes.
So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said recently we have to meet threats with capabilities.
Yes.
But yet, we spend all this money on multi-billion-dollar systems that are still seemingly in development and way over budget. And as you pointed out recently, not enough on kind of the basic military essentials like ammo and artillery.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
and explosives and inexpensive drones, right? We're learning very much from Ukraine. I mean, we're shooting $1 million missiles at $50,000 drones, sometimes now even $10,000 fake drones, just so they can elicit that $1 million missile, right? If you look back to the history of conflict since World War II, we've lost every single war that we fought except for Desert Storm. We've built a military that is really incredible in terms of its capabilities, right?
Yeah.
But its ability to deliver those capabilities over the long term while winning the economics of warfare is non-existent. So if the war goes for more than 5, 6, 7, or 8 days, and we are not able to achieve strategic overmatch against our adversary, or they're flexible and pliable enough to survive that initial onslaught that we are so good at providing, we're fundamentally going to lose the war because we're going to lose the economics of it, right? We've developed a defense industrial base that is really good at producing the high-cost problems to our enemy's low-cost solutions. And so as we reflect on what it really means to address and array our capabilities to our adversaries' threats, we have to do so in a paradigm where we're creating the low-cost solutions to our enemy's high-cost problems. If we don't do that, we're going to continue to lose.
So China, they have very cost-effective investments, it seems, in their military. That's another thing we have to kind of wake up about, isn't it? That they're doing it for less cost than we are, and yet they're building a military machine that, is going to be daunting.
They also have cost-effective manufacturing, right? And this is why it's so important to bring back critical manufacturing sectors into the United States. President Trump understands that. But as someone who is also in defense manufacturing, I understand you can't just turn that on overnight.
Yeah.
You can't just build a new ship on a Saturday or a new airplane.
Right.
Even cost-effective versions of those. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of capability. It takes a lot of skill and discipline within our workforce. And all those things have to come together in order to actually achieve the results you're looking to achieve in our industrial base. So this is something that can't happen overnight, but we have to start right now moving in a different direction, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble in 5 or 10 years.
Well, you and your wife started your own firearms company, so you would know what you're talking about in terms of providing defense-oriented capability either to individuals or to others.
Yes, and we play in the small arms space. And so my background as a Green Beret is irregular and unconventional warfare, really, really good at picking apart governments and figuring out how to pull its strings and make it almost impossible for a government to govern. And we've got to understand that that is the low-cost solution provider as the world burns right now. It's not the quickest way to end a conflict. It is certainly not the road that comes without sacrifice. But over the long haul, that methodology of conflict, it wins. It always wins. And as President Biden said, we have this discussion over assault weapons in this country, or so-called assault weapons in this country. He said, why do you need AR-15s to protect yourself from your government? We have F-15s. You need F-15s if you want to protect yourself from our government. And, I've always kind of laughed at that because I thought President Biden was pretty short-sighted in his understanding of history, is that the AR-15 will always beat the F-15 over time and at scale. That pilot cannot stay in that cockpit forever. And that's the lesson of our conflicts in Korea. It's the lesson of our conflicts in Vietnam. It is absolutely the legacy of our lessons in the global war on terror in multiple different theaters, where we rolled multi-million-dollar vehicles over the ground that were destroyed multiple times per day in different theaters by $20 worth of repurposed explosives and farm supplies.
The idea of putting more military on the southern border. I mean, Americans have had it up to here with all the stories about how people were piling over the border in record numbers under the last administration. That has changed already and very radically under President Trump. You're 100% in support of that, aren't you, Congressman?
I'm 100% in support of that. We've got to understand this is kind of like the situation when you're on the airplane and there's an emergency and the oxygen masks come down and they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on before you put the oxygen mask of the person sitting next to you, even if they're your family, right? We've got to do that exact same thing when it comes to our national sovereignty and our national defense. If we're not wiretight here, we can't hope to possibly export the great concepts of freedom and democracy, free market economies to the rest of the world.
One of the biggest issues always will be the economy. you're a very, very big deficit hawk.
Yes.
It bothers you, me, and should bother every American.
Yes.
We're up to $37 trillion in debt.
36.3. Yep.
And we're finally talking about doing things to turn that ship around.
Yeah.
But you authored with Josh Riley from New York, the Lowering Egg Prices Act. I love that because the price of eggs now seems to be the definition of whether or not in microeconomics it's working for Americans.
Without a doubt. You have to understand that this was a place where we could find wins across the board. Josh and I collaborated and we discovered something that reduced regulation, right? And it was an Obama era regulation that actually put these constraints in place on the farming industry. And it's something that enables 400 million more eggs per year to actually go into American products.
It's a lot of eggs.
That's a lot of eggs, right? And it's not a huge number compared to what we consume because there's, 334 million people in the country, right? But someone told me, a very wise man once told me, pennies make dollars and dollars make millions. Never skip the pennies. And so if you look at the small things, right, we reduced regulation. We enabled more eggs to come into the market, which is going to reduce prices for the consumer. And we reduce the waste that farmers have by 400 million eggs a year, which just helps their bottom line. This was a win-win-win for everyone. And those type of wins are possible if you look for them.
You've been deployed, all over the world in defense of America, but you recently talked about probably your favorite deployment, which is the one you have right now because you're closer to your family.
Yes.
How nice is it to actually be back as dad?
My wife loves it because it is like a deployment where I get to come home on the weekends, right? She's used to this old hat, but as a special operator, my wife and I actually didn't have kids until I was done doing that because I didn't want to be that absentee father or that dead father, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that's new for my kids. But one thing that we do every single night, 8 o'clock, no matter what I'm doing, I always keep with me a Nancy Drew book. And I read one chapter to them at 8 o'clock, and that's kind of our little thing. And that keeps us connected, close together. And I'll be back with them again tonight. So can't wait.
Congressman, welcome to Washington. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone in America for your service, your brave service, for standing up not just on the economy and trying to make it easier on hardworking Americans, but on standing up for this country on the front lines where it really counts.
Well, I was glad to do it, and I'm honored to continue to be able to do it. So thank you, Adam.
Great to be with you.
Same.